Greetings, lovers of lore. Thank you for joining me for another installment of the Dominaria United story. We're doing another side story today. This one is following a person we've never met before by the name of Ulf. Now, Ulf is a mage on Teleria at the Latnam Academy. Now, he's more a researcher than a mage. As an actual mage, he's pretty unremarkable. He can handle some really basic magic, but he always messes up his runes. Nothing ever really works out for him in terms of his magic, but he is quite good at applying himself to studies and getting deep into the research. And on the side of things, he also mucks out the stable and does other unwanted menial labor around the school. Basically, what he's trying to do is learn magic while also avoiding notice, kind of staying to the corners. But unfortunately for him, it didn't take too long of being a student before a dwarven docent, and if you don't know what a docent is, it's like a teacher's assistant in a way. So one of these docents, an artificer by the name of Thraengeld, approached Ulf and said, "You're no good at magic." And Ulf could only respond with, "Sorry, sir." And Thraengeld kept going. "You're also no good at artificing either, Ulf." And Ulf could only nod at that. "What are you good at, Ulf?" Ulf looked sheepish. "I don't rightly know." "Well, why are you here then?" Ulf was somewhat timid, but his response was clear. "To be a mage." Thraengeld kept pushing at him though. "Agricultural studies are a better fit for you, working with the horses and the stables." But Ulf was stubborn. "I came here to be a mage." Ulf knew that his father had always wanted him to stay and inherit the farm, but his mother, who was long dead, might have actually been on board with him going to become a student. Rumor was that magic ran on her side of the family. Ulf's musings were interrupted when Thraengeld narrowed his eyes and grabbed a nearby strange lamp. He swung the lamp right into Ulf's eyes. Ulf blinked back against the light, and Thraengeld relaxed. "You're not a Phyrexian then." Ulf was clueless. Phyrexians? He had never heard of them. So Thraengeld went on to explain that they're monsters of flesh and metal that wish to destroy us and all life. Ulf was frightened. "They're here? In Latnam? The Telerian Academy?" Thraengeld gave him a level look. "They're everywhere, Ulf. You're good at research, my boy. There's something I want for you to do for me on the side." This was an ordinary sort of occurrence. Most students had additional tasks given to them from their docents. So Ulf had his regular assigned topic, the Silex blast, that he had to report on in class, just like every student for years immemorial at the school. But in addition, Thraengeld wanted him to do research on Corrondor, but he also wanted him to keep it hush-hush. There was no reason to discuss this. Now, when it came to the main research, Ulf had zero problem with the Silex blast information. There were tons of easily accessible books that had been used by students over the years. But Ulf prided himself on going above and beyond. So what he did was he reached out into some exterior sources and added in information into his school report that would never have been included in any other report made by any student. But when it came to researching information about Corrondor, that was far more difficult. In the main library, there was barely anything. Tiny little references, and the section that should have been dedicated to Corrondor was empty. The books were missing. Ulf stopped for a moment. "Is this a test?" he wondered. "Is Thraengeld actually testing me?" But regardless, he spent the next few weeks checking each shelf in the main library, reshelving out-of-place books, and the missing books never appeared. So at that point, Ulf started to move out into the side chambers of the library. Now, these were far less organized. Instead of having all the books neatly arrayed on shelves, they're tossed in piles off to the side, awaiting somebody to come and deal with them. Ulf went through a number of these different side chambers with absolutely no result. But in one of them, he found a tumbled pile of books, and hidden back in the one corner was a mildewed book with the cover torn off, and he picked it up off of the ground and started to flip through it. And he noticed that it was written in Old Vidalian, an ancient merfolk language. As he started to read, he wasn't sure he was clearly understanding the words, but what it looked like it said to him was something about Solkanar, a demon king of Corrondor, who was once a forest guardian, a force of nature that was cursed by the planeswalker Gaedrone Dahada. Solkanar wielded the Blackblade that was once created by Dakin Blackblade. The book detailed the curse that had been placed on Solkanar and multiple ways that it could be removed. One of those ways was to slay Dahada. Ulf was pleased with his discovery. Accurate history details about Corrondor were extremely rare. This would prove his value to Thranegeld. But then Ulf had a dreadful thought. Wait, what if this is just fantasy? This needs verification. At that point, Ulf set out to see Silas Broughton. Silas only taught advanced students, and he specialized in Old Vidalian. And when Ulf originally knocked on his door, Silas thought that he was there because there was a problem with his horse. Something amiss in the stables, boy? Ulf looked embarrassed. No, sir, I have a question for you. Silas said, about the agricultural program then. Again, Ulf had to correct him. No, sir, I'm studying magic. A surprised look flitted across Silas's face, but he said, I can spare a moment for you. Ulf comes in and starts to explain the situation to Silas, handing him the book. And at first, Silas takes the book disinterested, clearly thinking it's not worth his time, and he starts to thumb through it. It doesn't take long before Silas sits up straight, looking directly at Ulf. Where did you get this? Ulf explained that he had found it in one of the adjacent side areas of the main library. Silas continued interrogating him. What were you researching that led to this? Ulf explained he was doing a project for Thranegeld, who wants information surrounding Corrondor. Silas whistled. This is an incredible find. It might be best if you leave it with me. But Ulf wants to show it to Thranegeld first. Now Silas hides his disappointment and agrees, hands the book back to Ulf, but ultimately you can see in his eyes that Silas desires this book. When Ulf delivered the book to Thranegeld, Thrangeld's hands actually started to shake. Do you know how long this has been lost? He looked at Ulf with newfound respect. Ulf couldn't help but ask, what are you going to do with the book? Thranegeld handed it back to him and said, rules of the mind, my boy. You dig it up, you keep it. Actually, stash it somewhere. Don't tell anyone you have it or where it is. This genuinely confused Ulf. Shouldn't we share this knowledge? Thranegeld gave him a smile and said, when the time's right, lad. When we know who our friends are. So Ulf hid the book in a cubby inside the stable under some hay. For the next few days, he continued his search for more books on Corrondor, but encountered absolutely none. 3 days after he had hidden the book, he comes back to his room that he shares with 3 other roommates, and the door is ajar. The lock has been forced. Ulf cautiously walks into the room and finds all 3 of his roommates dead. One had been chopped into tiny chunks and piled neatly in the corner. There were pages all over the floor. Everything had been destroyed. Even his bedding was shredded. Ulf fled in terror to the stables. The book was too dangerous. He would make Thranegeld take it from him. There was no way this could be left in his hands. So after he retrieved the book, he hurried to Thrangeld's office. But unfortunately, as soon as he went to speak to Thranegeld, he found out someone had been there first. Thranegeld was bone white, his face etched with fear. It had not been an easy death for him. Ulf ran out of the room panicking, his mind racing. He locked himself in a bathroom to give himself a moment to think. Breathing as deeply as he could, he pondered, who could he possibly give this book to? Would they be safe? Was he going to be blamed for these murders? He needed someone to talk to, so he headed back to Silas and explained everything that had happened. Silas says it's very clear what you need to do. You need to get rid of the book. That's what they're after. Ulf was panic-stricken. Who's after the book and why? Best if you never know. You're young and untrained. You can leave the book with me. Silas's words started to convince Ulf, and he reached towards his pocket, ever obedient. But something stayed his hand at the last moment. Silas was too eager. You have the book? He pressed. Ulf started to back away, And before he could even finish his sentence, Silas's skin split in half, and he tore his own face off and threw it to the floor. His mechanical voice barked out, "Give me the book, boy!" Ulf leapt backwards, slamming the door as hard as he could as he did so, barely escaping in time. Silas burst through the door, bellowing, "Give up, and I might let you live." Ulf charged down the hall, running past students who were wholly unprepared for the Phyrexian horror marauding down the hall behind him. One of the students had the wherewithal to blast a bolt of lightning at Silas. It tore through his body with no effect, and then Silas was on both of the students, tearing them into pieces. Ulf just kept running. He ran up a set of stairs to another floor, Silas somehow still hot on his heels in a way that Ulf couldn't understand. And up ahead, Ulf sees there is another student, a girl, and he yells to her, "Run!" But she doesn't. She just stands there. And as he gets closer, he can see with horror that there is oil dripping from her eyes. She's a Phyrexian agent, and she leaps at him as he tries to pass her, but she nearly misses, grabbing onto his robe. Ulf knocks her away and rounds the corner. Unfortunately for him, it's a dead end. He turns around, and both Silas and the Phyrexian student are there. Silas gives him a choice. "Give me the book, boy. I'll give you a clean death. Otherwise, you die painfully." Ulf had a quick idea. "Stop, or I'll destroy the book." He held it up menacingly. Silas sneered. "How do you know that's not what we want to do with the book?" But the conversation was interrupted by the wall bursting forwards in a massive explosion. A giant Viashino warrior came lumbering into the hall and turned to Ulf. "Go, find him." Ulf wasn't sure who he meant, but turned and ran anyhow. Silas commanded the Phyrexian student to follow Ulf and turned to face off against the Viashino. Ulf used his head start to run to the library, and he ended up going to the area where the missing books were on Corrondor and climbed in behind the bookshelves into a little cubby area. His mind was racing. How could he help to defend the school? What if everyone but him was Phyrexian? Those thoughts were broken into shards when the face of the Phyrexian student appeared at eye level with him. "Give me the book," she hissed as she reached her hand in towards him. But suddenly, she was yanked backwards up into the air, and a moment later, her head dropped to the floor, followed quickly by her body. Ulf scrambled out of his hiding place to see a strong, hulking man standing before him, a giant sword of fiery metal with Phyrexian blood sizzling off of it. Ulf noticed that below his eye, he had the mark of the Elder Druid. And from what he had read in his studies, this mark was given to a distinct, chosen few. This was a special individual indeed. The stranger spoke. She was innocent. You could hear the sadness in his voice. Ulf asked, "Who are you?" The man just said, "Shut up, don't move." And he started to run his hands all over Ulf's body. When he was finished, he came back with a little metallic burr that he crushed under his foot. "They're gonna have a hard time tracking you now. We need to go. You have the book?" Ulf was cautious. There was no way to know if this was another Phyrexian agent. So he said, "I know where it is. Do you want it?" And the man said, "No, I need to keep my hands free, and they'll target the book holder. You keep it." This caused Ulf to have mixed emotions. The man crouched down and looked under the door and then whispered to Ulf, "There's 5 sets of feet." Ulf whispered back, "What do we do?" The man said, "Kill them." Ulf was afraid. "I don't know how." The man looked him up and down appraisingly. "Of course you don't, but you're about to learn." On the other side of the door, 2 of the Phyrexians were having a conversation. One of them said, "Are you sure he's in there?" The other said, "This is the last known location. There's no other way out. They're trapped inside there. We're going to wait for Silas." Now, this conversation was interrupted as the wall explodes outwards and the Elder Druid stranger runs in and slaughters all 5 Phyrexians with his sword and fire, and then he leaves the fire burning as a distraction. The stranger continues to lead Ulf towards the exit. On the way, they came across the Viashino who saved Ulf, and they took a moment where the Elder Druid stopped and said, "Your death was not in vain." They were almost at the front door to leave when the Elder Druid abruptly grabbed Ulf and pulled him back. Too easy. There's something off here. He went and grabbed a desk, and he threw it near the door. As soon as it came close, blades started to fly in every direction, and the desk was absolutely demolished, chunks of it raining down onto the floor. Ulf's eyes went wide from fear. How are we supposed to get out of here now? The stranger gave him a quizzical look. The rune magic's gone. You can't tell that? Are you sure you're a mage? Ulf was defensive. I'm a good researcher. The stranger looked at him. If you're a sleeper, I'll chop you into bits myself. You tell me the real reason you're here. Ulf was terrified, so he just told him the truth. I think they only let me in because they wanted someone to work the stables. The stranger laughed and relaxed at that. Lazy mages, not wanting to get their hands dirty. Sounds about right. They approached the front door, but Silas had made his way to them and was blocking the way. The stranger looked at him and said, take the book, leave the boy. Silas had a big grin on his face. You've always been our target, Jared Carthalion. I don't care about the book. I don't care about the boy. Saying that, Silas reformed the metal on his body so that over his ribcage a sword blade was formed, and he pulled it off of his chest. Jared drew his sword, and they engaged in an epic battle where Jared is the more skillful fighter, but Silas is a relentless machine. So even though he's outmatched skill-wise, he has unending stamina. And the fight is pretty much going back and forth with no real clear winner until suddenly Silas opens up a compartment in his leg and whips out a nasty little blade that's heading straight toward Jared's thigh. But Ulf cries out at the last moment and Jared's able to leap back. So instead of having his entire leg chopped off, it just cuts a gash in him. Even with the wound and the blood loss, Jared's better skills were winning out for him. They went back and forth until eventually Silas's sword broke. At that point, Jared took his blade and drove it straight into Silas's chest. While he was doing so, he started to demand answers. Why were you sent? Who are you working with? Silas just smiled at him as blood poured from his mouth, and he died saying, Dahada's waiting for you, Jared. Jared tore a strip off of Silas's clothing to bind his leg. Ulf turned to him and said, where are we going next? Jared says, I'm staying here to save others. There are more innocents. So those who are still human, I will save. The rest I will destroy. You are going to Corrondor. You're going to take that book to safety, and I'm going to meet you there. You stay off the main roads. You show that book to no one. And the side story ends with a reveal that this has all been orchestrated by Dahada Gaedron, who is actually masquerading as the archmage of the school. What she's done is manipulated Jared into doing exactly what she wants. All right, my friends, I hope that you enjoyed this installment of the Dominaria United lore. There is more coming soon, so if you don't want to miss it, make sure that you subscribe. If you like what we're doing here, you can support us by joining the Patreon or the channel membership. It makes a big difference. Thanks for coming by, my friends, and remember, lore is life.